If you want to create your own player in Professional Baseball Spirits 2024-2025, there's two ways you can go about it. You can select a rookie in the Star Player mode. This will allow you to create your own brand new player. But the more interesting option is choosing Spirits mode. The main reason you might want to create a player in Spirits mode compared to just in Star Player is because you can actually start with better stats, more special abilities, and just basically get a head start in the game. You can still change your appearance, your equipment, your batting form and such, but it just gives you a bit of a head start. In Spirits mode, you basically play two different mini-games which allow you to gain points. You can then use those points to increase your stats and also get other special abilities. When you click into Spirits mode, you're greeted with two options: Card Challenge and Awakening Chance. In this video I'm just going to go over the Card Challenge. The Awakening Chance needs a further explanation. The first thing to do is pick a team. On the next screen you'll be granted two options. The top one is to choose which dominant arm you want to use for fielding and throwing, top being right, bottom being left. Underneath that you have the batting options. You can choose between right, left and switch. Once you're happy you can then hit OK, and then it's on to choosing your position. You can select between all the positions on a baseball team. If you do fancy being a two-way player, it's best to pick a pitcher. The reason for this is if you pick an infielder or an outfielder, then you don't actually earn any pitching stats. If you pick a pitcher, not only do you earn pitching points, but you also get batting stats to add as well. If you've chosen to be a fielder, then on the next screen you're going to be able to select your initial hot and cold zones. You only have a limited amount of points and you don't have to put anything there if you don't want to. You can increase it by pressing X and decrease the zones by pressing square. Once you've set your hot and cold zone, or if you selected a pitcher, then on the next screen you're going to be able to choose whether you want to use some bonus items or not. These can be found in the VP shop, and if you do have any, you can switch them on here. One of them will grant an extra 20% points and the other one will grant you an extra 30%. Once that's all done, you'll then be brought to the main card challenge screen. You'll see in the middle you'll be dealt 5 cards. Cards themselves have 3 different things on them. First will be the number. That number ranges between 1 and 10. The higher the number, the more points you'll get. Next are the 4 colours which represent each stat. Red represents contact for a batter and pitching stats for a pitcher. Orange represents power for a batter and stamina for a pitcher. Blue represents speed for a batter and mental strength for a pitcher. And finally green represents fielding for a batter and pitch types for a pitcher. You may see some yellow text on the bottom of some of the cards. That represents some of the bonuses you can achieve, but I'll go over those in a second. Underneath the 5 cards you'll also see 5 buttons and an OK button. The whole point of this is that you're meant to make hands just like in poker. The button underneath each card allows you to hold it. So say for example you want to hold a pair of something, if you click the 2 buttons underneath and then hit OK, all the other buttons you didn't highlight will then be dealt new cards. Next you have the items in the top left. The first one shows you how many turns you've got left. You start with 10 and you lose one every time that you've either made a hand or not. After that you have how many double up chances you have and how many special training chances you have, but again I'll go over those in a sec. Underneath the card you'll see your stats and how many points you've banked so far. If you're playing as a fielder, then the stats will go contact, power, speed and fielding. If you're a pitcher, it will go pitching, stamina, mental and pitch type. As I said before, if you've selected to be a pitcher, you will still earn hitting stats, you just won't see them on the bottom of this screen. After those 4 stats is the spirit counter. This shows you how many you currently got banked, but also allows you to see how many you could win on the final challenge. As you want to try and make the best hands you can, if you're unsure what you should be looking for, you can always press square to bring up the card list. It will give you a list of every single hand that you can aim for. If you've ever played poker, then a lot of these hands will seem familiar. The better the hand, the better the multiplier on the points, so you really do want to try and get the best hand you can. Once you've made a point scoring hand, and if you've got any chances left, the game will ask you if you want to double up. This is just a single game of higher or lower. Get it right and it will multiply the points by whatever total it shows in the middle. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. So say for example you draw a 9 and you go higher, you're going to get a bigger multiplier than if you just went lower. If you do happen to lose though, you will lose all of those points. You won't however lose everything that's already been banked, just the points that you would have earned on this try. Even if you make a hand or not, any cards that have the yellow text on them will grant you bonuses. These bonuses range from increasing a stat by 100 points, plus 2 spirits, plus 1 turn, plus 1 double chance, and plus 1 special training chance. Depending on how many points you've already got, you may want to try and aim for getting more bonuses so you can get more turns and chances at doubling up and special training. The amount of spirit points you get is also determined by the hand you end up with. The better the hand, the more spirit points. You'll also gain bonus spirit points that can be claimed later in the 1 ball challenge. The amount of points you get is based on the lowest card that wasn't used to form a hand. Once you've used up all your turns, you will then be granted the 1 ball challenge. This is one final game of higher or lower. If you get this one right, you'll get all the bonus points that haven't been banked in the bottom right corner. Get it wrong and you won't get any of them. The downside to this is that it costs 20% of your already banked stat points. So depending on how many points you have, you may or may not want to take this chance. Spirits are just as important as stat points though, so if you do have a large amount waiting to be banked, it might be worth the risk. You'll need spirits to get your stats past certain levels and also to get special abilities, so having more is always welcome. You can at any point press circle and this will bring up a menu during the card challenge and special training. The top option just allows you to continue on. The middle option allows you to retry, so if you're having bad luck you can always just restart again. The last option will end both challenges and take you straight to the edit screen. After all of that, you'll then be able to take part in special training chances. You'll be shown 15 cards set out 5x3. Here you have the ability of increasing some of your stat points, but also gaining special abilities. You can do this as many times as you earn special training chances. The more chances you have, the higher the level you can get as you play the game. This means it will draw higher special abilities and higher stat cards. You're given 20 seconds to memorise all the cards on screen, or just the ones you want to focus on. After those 20 seconds, all the cards are going to get shuffled, and you get the choice to pick one card. Sometimes there's a card that's highlighted and glowing. It's usually the best card on the screen, but it's not always the card that you may want in that situation. Once you've used up all your special training chances, then it's finally time to enter the edit screen. Here's where you'll be able to increase your stats, change your appearance, your equipment, and everything else. The first option is to increase your stats. If you chose a pitcher, then you'll be able to cycle through 8 stats, 4 for pitching and 4 for batting and fielding, but if you chose a fielder, you'll only be able to choose between 4. There's too many stats to go over every single one here, but a lot of them are quite obvious. For example, underneath pitching, you're going to see a stat that's got a kilometers an hour on it. Increasing that will then increase your ball speed. If any stat has its cost as a number plus another number, it just means that it requires spirits as well. Once you get to sea level on most stats, they're going to start requiring spirit points. This is why having thousands of points is good, but if you don't have the spirits to back it up, it doesn't really mean anything. If anyone wants me to go over every single one of these stats, then just let me know in the comments below and I'll try and make a video on it. One quick one to go over is for pitching. If you go to the last stat, which is pitch type, you're able to actually choose which pitches your player can learn. Not only are you able to learn all the different types of pitches, but you can also learn secondary pitches as well. If you choose any pitch type and then choose any of the options, at the very bottom you're going to see one that says 50 plus 1. This allows you to create your own version of that pitch, so you could create your own fastball, your own curveball, slider, whichever one you want. You can do a load of different things depending on what the type of pitch is, such as changing the amount of break the ball will have, all the way up to the initial and ending velocities. Don't worry if you can't use all of your points, it's just something that may or may not happen. After that you have the ability of entering your details. The top box allows you to put in your last name. The next box allows you to put in your first name. Next is putting in your nickname. Underneath that you have the ability of changing the order of which your names appear. So if you want it to go last name, first name, just like in Japanese, or if you'd like it to be like in the West, first name and last name. Next you can change how your name displays in menus. After that is changing the uniform name. And finally you can choose your player uniform number. Next is changing the call settings. The top option is choosing the commentary voice. Here you have to spell out in hiragana how the commentary will say your name. As the only available option is using the hiragana keyboard, you're either going to have to know how to spell your player's name or look it up online. The second option allows you to choose what name gets said over the PA system in the stadiums. For this there's a load of pre-made names, so you can't input your own. If you want to preview what either name sounds like, just press square. After that is the basic settings. First up is changing your date of birth. Next is changing how many pro years you want your player to have. Next you can set your baseball history level. You can choose between high school, university, a worker, the independent league, abroad, or other. The next option allows you to choose whether you want to be a Rookie of the Year contender. By default this will be set to yes, but above it you can select no. Next is your free agency rights. You can choose from starting as a free agent all the way up to an 8-year contract, but you can also choose a 1 to 4 year recertification. The next option is choosing your birthplace. Underneath that you can choose where in the team your player will fit in their player quota. As teams can only have a certain amount of international players, the top option allows you to be part of the Japanese quota, while the bottom option allows you to be in the international quota. The bottom two options, which are usually greyed out, just show your batting and arm options that you chose at the start. Next you have the appearance settings. While there's a lot to go over here, all of them are pretty obvious as to what they do. Apart from changing things like your hair colour, your body shape and such, then the other options will allow you to change the proportions of whichever body part you've chosen. Just simply use the right stick up and down, left and right to change whichever selection you've got. If you chose a pitcher, then next you'll be able to choose your pitching form. You can either set it yourself, which is the top option, or you can choose random, which is the bottom one. If you've chosen to set it yourself, you'll then see 3 more options. The top selection will allow you to choose from every single player in the game. If there's a specific player you want to choose and you know which team they play for, then choose the bottom option and then choose that team. Once you've selected a form, you can then change your stance, which is the next button. Here you can choose between whether you're adjusting with runners on base or without. You can do things like bring the glove closer to you, but also bring it higher. The final option allows you to edit the release point of the ball. Next is the batting form. Again, much like the pitcher, the top option allows you to set it yourself and the bottom option will choose a randomized version. If you've chosen to set it yourself, then the top option again will allow you to select from all players, while the bottom option will allow you to pick from a specific team. Underneath that is a lot more options to be able to tweak the batting form. There's too many to talk about here, but again, much like the appearance settings, it's pretty obvious what they do if you play around with them. Next is the equipment settings. I've actually done a video explaining the equipment options, so it's worth giving that a watch rather than extending the length of this video any longer than it needs to be. The final option, and possibly one of the most confusing ones, is the AI settings. Here you're basically setting what you'd like the computer to do when you're not in control of your own player. You'll see 4 buttons that you can select along the top. The first button allows you to set the AI pitching patterns and the AI batting patterns. The grid at the top with all the 50% signs allows you to set your fastball tendency. Here you have the option of increasing and decreasing how often you want the computer to use a fastball depending on the count. Underneath that is the batting tendency. Here you can choose how the computer as a batter will try to hit to different areas of the ballpark. You have the option of setting this for lefties and for righties. Increasing the levels will make the computer try to aim for those spots, and obviously decreasing them will mean that they'll try not to. Underneath the batting tendencies, you're able to set the safety bunt awareness. You can choose between off, slightly, which means that they're aware that they could potentially safety bunt, and the last setting will mean that they'll intentionally try to safety bunt. If you click the next button at the top, you're then able to set all the special abilities. The first set of buttons will allow you to change your special ability tendencies. The first option allows you to choose nothing. Next is a quick tempo, which means if the computer's pitching, it will just try and keep playing as fast as possible. Next is a thinking tempo, which means the computer will think carefully about which pitches it's trying to throw. Underneath that, you have the option of choosing whether the computer alternates between slow and fast pitches or not at all. And underneath that, you have the ability of choosing whether the computer only pitches in the strike zone or not. The next line allows you to choose how aggressive the computer batter will be. It goes from A to G, with A being very aggressive and G being passive. Underneath that, you have the batter's zone recognition. A means that they'll only swing at pitches inside the zone, with G meaning that they'll just swing at anything. Next, you can choose your player's batting style. You can choose between no style, team, which means they'll try and actively help out the team depending on what the situation is, and individual, which means that they'll just try and hit the ball regardless of how many outs all players are on base. The next line allows you to choose what style of hitting they'll do. First, you just have no style. Next, you have aiming for home runs. Next, you've got trying to just be a contact hitter. And finally, you have a hitter who's just trying to hit the ball hard. Underneath that, you can choose between whether you want the computer to focus on pitches and hitting with precision, or if you just want them to just hit with their reflexes. Next, you can choose the base running styles. The first option allows you to choose between nothing, and the second option means that they'll always be aiming for the next base. Underneath that is their stealing tendencies. You can choose between none, aggressive base stealing, or careful base stealing. The last option is choosing how they play defense. You can choose between normal, active, which means that they'll try and actively get the ball if it's anywhere near them, or careful, which means that they'll think about where they are before they try and play the ball. The last 2 buttons along the top basically do the same thing. The first one will initialize all your stats. The second one will just reset everything to square one. And that's it. Once you're happy with everything, you can then just hit OK at the top and then register your player to an empty slot. If there is something later on that you want to change, then you are able to edit it anyway, so don't worry about making final adjustments here. If you want to play as them in Star Player mode, then just make sure you hit Original at the very start, and then click whichever player you want to play as. You can quickly make some really good players in this mode, far better than you could if you just started playing Star Player mode. This is especially true if you want to make a two-way player like Otani, so I'd always recommend doing Spirits mode first before you go into Star Player mode. As I said before, there's a lot of stats and abilities you can put your points into, so I'll try and get around to making a video explaining them, but there's quite a lot to explain for that, so apologies if it does take some time to come out. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you do have any other questions, then just drop a comment below. I hope everyone's been enjoying the game, and I'll catch you next time.